So black just went for the idea of knight f6, but here we play the key idea as white, d4, and this is where black is in trouble. What is going on, chess YouTube? In today's video, I want to show you a crazy high win rate opening you can play as white after the opening moves e4 and then e5. This line continues knight f3, knight c6, then bishop c4, the Italian opening. Now, this line works especially well if black does go bishop c5 before knight f6. So, bishop c5 is going to be the line in this opening, white castles, and then of course black goes knight f6. That is the most logical move here. And here, normally, white would go, say, d3 or knight c3 or rook e1, something to defend the pawn on the e4 square. However, in this position, we're not doing any of those things. We're actually going to play a completely different idea, and this move, I almost guarantee it will catch your opponents way off guard. It is the move d4, striking in the center, and real fast, why is this move so shocking? Well, it's very simple. This pawn on d4 is being attacked 3 times by the pawn, by the bishop, and by the knight. I mean, we are literally giving up a pawn for free, but here's the kicker. Black can attack it one of 3 different ways. However, 2 of these recaptures are effectively losing on the spot. And even if he finds the best recapture, white has so many dangerous ideas, it is very difficult for black to hang on unless he already memorized literally everything from start to finish. And if you're a beginner or an intermediate player, I almost guarantee your opponent has not memorized all of these different variations, meaning you can score a lot of really fast wins as white here with this opening. All right, now, real fast. Again, black can recapture with any of these 3 pieces, but no matter what he does, white is going to have an excellent position. Now, first of all, this pawn on e4 is obviously hanging, but black obviously cannot take here, as then you lose the bishop on c5 to d takes c5, and white is literally up a piece and completely winning. You simply cannot do that. Now, the move e takes d4, that looks very logical. You're capturing towards the center effectively with the pawn. However, this move already lands black in a very difficult position, and the key move here from white is going to be e5. So, overall, this is one of the key ideas of this gambit. We give up the pawn on d4 to deflect this pawn away from the e5 square. And with that pawn gone, there is nothing stopping this pawn from marching up the board, knocking back that knight on f6, and from there, white's attack is going to continue pretty much unrestricted. So e5 is going to be the move, and now this knight must go somewhere, but it turns out it really doesn't have an easy square to go to. I mean, almost everything here is going to be booby-trapped. For example, you can't go to d5, the bishop controls that. If you go to, say, h5, then the move g4 is going to win the knight on the spot, as that knight literally cannot go anywhere. So, as you can see, most of these squares are booby-trapped. The only decent squares are going to be, say, g4 and g8, but it turns out knight g8 actually loses almost on the spot. Here, after knight g8, white is going to go knight g5, targeting that pawn on f7 in the spirit of the fried liver attack. If you don't know, the fried liver is where white plays the Italian opening. He plays 3, bishop c4, and if black goes knight f6, then immediately 4, knight g5 targets the pawn on f7, so it's a key tactical idea in the Italian opening, and here it works very, very well. Obviously, black is in no position to try and go knight f6 and castle. First of all, the pawn controls that, but second of all, white's going to take on f7 before black can even think about castling. So here, knight h6 is going to be forced. It does defend f7, however, the attack is not over. Let's say white goes rook e1, a very good move. And now, let's say here, black has the audacity to castle in this position. Now, castling looks logical at first glance if your name is not Stockfish, but if your name is Stockfish, you're going to recognize immediately that black is basically getting checkmated on the spot. Here, white plays the very simple move queen to d3, and look at this. The threat is queen takes h7, checkmating the black king, and there's almost nothing he can do to stop the attack. Let's say you go g6. Of course, f5 is not possible, as that pawn is pinned by the bishop to the king. So G6 might be the only move to survive, but then queen to H3, you slide the queen over, threaten the knight, and if you move the knight, say knight F5, then black is checkmated on H7 in literally one move. So you can't do that. You have to go king G7, trying to defend. But here, white has the most insane tactical sequence you will maybe, I'm not going to say ever see, but certainly this week. This one is a mind-bending idea. And if you like puzzles, pause the video right now and try to solve for the mind-bending idea from white. And obviously, we're going to sacrifice the queen. Yes, that's right, a queen sacrifice. We deflect the king to the H6 square, and then we go knight takes F7 with the double check with the knight and the bishop. Knight takes F7, again, the double check. The king must move, and once it moves, we take the queen on D8. So king G7, bishop H6. We bring our bishop out. The king can't take here as the knight controls that, and the knight is defended by the bishop. Therefore, a move like king G8 is forced. Then we go knight takes D8, winning the queen, and the king is still under check. King H8. Then we go knight takes D6, D takes C6, and finally, we win the rook. Bishop takes F8, bishop takes, and then E6, threatening E7. Black is down basically an entire rook in this position, and he's getting blown off the board. So, overall, knight G8 does not work in this position. You go E5, and then attack the knight, and if black goes knight G8, then the entire idea of knight G5, forcing out knight H6, and potentially threatening a queen D3 idea if black castles, that is just deadly. Now, knight G8, what else can black do? Knight G4, that might be the best move here, but white has a couple of very dangerous ideas. I'll show you the objectively correct variation first, and then I'll show you the flashy option that might even work a little bit better in a practical game. So, the objectively good variation. We're going to go bishop F4. The idea being we defend the pawn on E5. The knight was targeting it, so now we defend the pawn. It's being attacked twice and defended twice. Therefore, black cannot take there. And here, black has a very hard time finishing development. If he castles, we're going to have a really good idea to capitalize on the weakness of the king side. However, if he doesn't castle, what exactly is black doing here? I mean, if you go D6, you're just opening lines against the king. White takes, goes rook E1 check, and so on. And black's king is just too exposed. But if you castle, then what you do is you go H3, drive back the knight. Again, the knight cannot take on E5 as we defend that twice with the bishop and the knight. Therefore, knight to H6 is forced, but then we give up our bishop for the knight. Bishop takes, G takes, and now look at this. The black pawn structure on the king side is just completely ruined. And from here, white can even play a pawn sacrifice, the move C3, sort of in the spirit of the Danish gambit. Here, black, if he takes, we bring out our knight. For example, D takes, knight takes, and suddenly this knight is super active. It's going to E4 or perhaps D5. And overall, white has a beautiful attacking game. And by the way, if black doesn't take on C3, let's say he wastes a move, I don't know, A6, then we can simply take on D4 with the pawn. And again, this pawn's going to D5, and black is getting just completely clobbered here. I mean, he has effectively no chance in this middle game if white plays correctly. So, overall, if black goes knight G4 instead of knight G8 in this position, then we just go bishop F4, drive back the knight. If the knight goes to H6, we take there, and the attack continues. But, of course, as I promised, white also has another idea. This one is a lot flashier and maybe even more dangerous in a practical game. Here, white has the option of playing the bishop sacrifice. Bishop takes F7. Now, this move is not 100% correct. However, it's very dangerous. The obvious tactical idea is if the king takes, then we're going to go knight G5, jumping up and attacking the king. And beyond that, the key point of the sacrifice, the knight on G4 will be exposed to the queen on D1. The queen will be threatening it, and we are going to regain the piece kind of immediately. So, for example, bishop takes F7, king takes, knight g5 check. And here we have the double attack on the king on f7 and the knight on g4. This is the key idea here. So the king must move somewhere else, king g8, for example, and then we go queen takes g4, gobbling up that knight on the g4 square. And overall, white here is doing pretty well, although black can hang in there after the move, say, d5, opening up the attack on the queen. White can go queen g3, defending e5, and overall, black should be okay. He might even technically be a little bit better, but white does have very good attacking chances. Now, personally, I prefer the move bishop f4 here, again, intending h3, knight h6, and then bishop takes, but either of these moves, bishop f4 or even bishop takes f7, are both playable. That way you have more options in your own games. Now, beyond knight g8 and knight g4, what can black do here? Well, there isn't a whole lot, but he does have the one idea of d5. So what is the idea here? Well, if white takes on f6, black is going to take back on c4. So it's sort of a both sides are giving up a piece, and it's very complicated. But again here, white should be in the driver's seat as he's already castled. The black king is stuck on e8, and after e takes f6, the e file will be opened up. And with the rook coming to e1 with check against the king, intuitively, you should just be able to look at that and say, wait a minute, there's got to be some kind of attack here. And it turns out there actually is. So we take the knight. E takes f6, black takes on c4, and then you can do either of these moves. Rook e1 first is good. You can also take on g7 first, as if you go f takes g7, the rook has to go to g8, and then you give the check. So either of these moves first is fine. They're both playable. So, for example, f takes g7, rook g8 is forced. There's no other way to save the rook. And then we go rook to e1, hitting the king on the e8 square. Very logical. Now here, black, he's got to defend against the check. The best moves here include bishop e6 and bishop e7. Either way you are defending, but let's say bishop e6, a logical idea. Now we're going to go bishop g5, attacking the queen with a gain of tempo, a very good idea in chess. I mean, anytime you can develop a piece and attack the opponent's queen and then continue developing, that is almost always a good idea. So what can black do here? Well, the queen doesn't have a whole lot of good squares to go to. Therefore, bishop e7, retreating and defending may actually be a decent idea. So bishop e7 from black is likely the best move. We can take the bishop, black takes back, and then we simply go knight takes d4. And in this position, if black could actually castle long on the queen side, he would be doing pretty okay. But it turns out you can't do that. If he castles long, that is a mistake. I mean, this is what he wants to do. Your king is stuck in the center, is stuck opposing the white rook on e1, and you've got to get it out of the way of the attack. And obviously, castling on the king's side is not a legal move, as the rook's already moved. But turns out here, long castles actually doesn't work. If you do it, you know what? Good time for a puzzle again. If you like puzzles, try to figure out why long castles right here is not a good idea for black, and try to find a way for white to just punish this immediately. And the move here is going to be knight takes c6. The point is, yes, the knight on d4 was pinned by the rook to the queen. If you move the knight, black is going to have the option of winning the queen on d1. However, there's an even more important factor at play here. If we go knight takes c6, here we are also threatening black's queen. And very importantly, if white takes on d1, that does not come with check. We can actually take on e7 immediately with check against the king, and black's going to have to waste another move moving his king, and then we can just take on d1. So, for example, here, if black goes rook takes d1, that is a massive mistake. We take on e7, the king's got to move, then we take the rook, black takes the knight, and here in this position, I mean, if my math is correct, I may have failed 5th grade math, but here, white has 2 rooks, black has 1 rook, and I think 2 rooks is worth more than 1 rook, and the eval bar on the left certainly confirms white is winning here. So, overall, after long castles, knight takes c6 is deadly, as rook takes d1 doesn't work. We can recapture the queen, and even if black goes b takes c6, That is the best move here. Then all we have to do is simply a move like queen to f3. We develop, get the queen off the back rank, we threaten c6, and from here, white's plan is very, very simple. We continue attacking, maybe we go knight c3, rook a d1. There are these open files in the middle, so controlling the center of the board is very, very important here. But overall, white's play is just very simple, very, very easy to play. So overall, this line, starting with the move after, let's go way back here. If black takes the pawn, e takes d4, then e5 is deadly. Again, knight g8 is not a good move. Knight g5 is deadly. Knight g4 is met by bishop f4, followed by h3, knight h6, bishop takes, and we attack. And finally, if black goes d5, then we just take here, opening up the e file, intending moves like rook e1, f takes g7, and so on. And white's attack just continues, and it's virtually unstoppable. So back to d4. Obviously, e takes d4 doesn't work here. What else can black do? Well, the obvious moves beyond that are knight takes d4 and bishop takes. Let's start with the move knight takes d4. This move is very logical. The reason for that is if you go bishop takes, you're essentially giving white the bishop pair. White has the option of taking on d4, black takes back, and then white's going to have the two bishops on c1 and c4. Black's only going to have one on c8, and normally the bishop pair is very, very valuable, especially in an open position. And according to a lot of top grandmasters, that bishop pair is worth roughly half a pawn advantage, so it's very important. Therefore, a lot of black players will go knight takes d4, with the point being if white takes, black takes back with the bishop, and he maintains his two bishops. It's a very logical play. It's according to basic chess principles. However, it doesn't work for tactical reasons. If you take with the knight, that knight on c6 is not there anymore, and it doesn't control e5. Therefore, after knight takes d4, white can actually take on e5. Knight takes e5, and here, this is already critical for black. He is at risk of being literally blown off the board. Let's examine four options here. Castles, knight e6, d5, and finally queen to e7. Only one of these moves lets black survive. Let's say he castles here. First of all, white's threat is so simple. Either knight takes f7 or bishop takes. Again, in the spirit of the fried liver attack, f7 is so weak here, black's got to find some way to defend. Let's say he castles, the point being his rook is now defending f7 plus the king. Therefore, at first glance, it looks like he's doing okay. However, the problem is white can go bishop e3. And now look at this. The knight on d4, it's being attacked by two pieces. It's being defended by one piece. And how do you get around this? If you go back to knight c6, you drop the bishop on c5 as the knight is pinned to the bishop. This is a very difficult position. If black goes knight e6, that is the main move you would check. Here, the knight retreats and it defends the bishop, and it looks like black is hanging on. Well, here we take the knight. This is a removing the defender move. The defender of the bishop is the knight on e6. We remove the defender with the move bishop takes e6. We take that knight here, and normally black would be able to go, say, bishop takes e3. And now both sides have these hanging bishops. White's is being attacked, black's is being attacked. If white takes, and black is doing fine. However, there's a big wrinkle here. White can actually play the move bishop takes f7, and it comes with check. That is the key idea. Now there's no time for say, bishop takes f2, as again, the king is under attack for black. Therefore, black's going to have to respond immediately. If he takes with the rook, then the move is knight takes f7. And here, look at this. Both sides still have one piece hanging. The big difference, though, is white is up material here. He's up one pawn, and he also has the extra rook versus the extra bishop of black, or the extra minor piece, rather. So white here is up material, and he's going to win. Let's say black, instead of rook takes, Let's say he goes king to h8, trying to be as tricky as possible. In that case, again, it's very simple. F takes e3, and black is essentially forced to take here. I mean, if you don't, what are you doing? If you take here, actually, knight takes f7 wins the queen, so that is no good. But if you don't take, what can you do? Well, black has one idea here, d6. The point being, he's trying to remove the defender of the bishop on f7. If you go back with the knight, say to f3, then black can take on f7, and he regains the piece, and he's doing fine, relatively speaking. I mean, it's not a great position. Black's still down a pawn, but he's still in the game. However, instead of retreating, we have a different idea with white. You can actually play the move knight g6. And the idea behind this move, white is going to lose one of his pieces here, the knight or the bishop. If you retreat the knight, black takes the bishop. If you retreat the bishop, black takes the knight. So one of these pieces is going to be lost. Therefore, you can play the move knight g6 here, and you're basically saying, I'm forking your rook and your king. If you take my knight with the move h takes, that is the best move. Then I take on g6, and I win your pawn on h7 in the process. So at least I get some material for it. And here, white is literally up 2 pawns. He has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pawns versus the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of black. And beyond that, black's king is super, super exposed. White's going to have ideas like perhaps rook f3 to h3 or queen f3 to h3 at some point in the future. Yes, the bishop does control h3 for now, but in the future, these will be ideas, or even rook f4 to h4 and so on. So overall, black here, if he plays the move castles in this position, he is getting blown off the board. What about a different move like knight to e6? The benefit of this is, again, white was threatening either minor piece jumping into the f7 square, therefore knight e6 does block the attack. However, here again, white can actually play the move bishop takes e6, and this move is just incredibly strong. What can black do here? Well, let's say he takes with the d-pawn. It turns out already this is a fatal blunder. Again, good time for a puzzle. If you like puzzles, pause the video and try to figure out what's going on here. So whenever you see the option of like taking queens with check against the king, you should always check these forcing ideas because sometimes they work out really, really well. And this is one of those cases. Here, white can take the queen. You always want to check these checks against the king, especially when they lead to captures of material. And if black takes back, he's moving away from the defense of the f7 pawn. So the combination goes queen takes d8, king takes, and then here the knight jumps in, knight takes f7, and you're forking the rook and the king on the d8 square. This is just deadly. So what if black doesn't do that? Let's say black goes, say, f takes e6. That is the best move here as you keep the d file closed. There are no queen takes d8 ideas. Well, even here, white is going to get a very large initiative. The best way to continue here is knight d3, you drop back the knight, you hit the bishop. The bishop's got to go somewhere. Bishop e7, for example. Now you can go e5, driving back the knight. And here is why this move is so good. Normally, when you go e5 like this, it's sort of a double-edged move. Yes, the pawn is very strong on e5, but if black can attack it later in the game, it might become a weakness. So whenever you go e5 or really push your pawns deep into enemy territory, you have to make sure the pawn will not be easily attacked, and you must continue applying pressure on the opponent's position. But here it all works out. If black goes, say, knight d5, the best move, we can actually go queen to f3. And the benefit of this, we stop black from castling. If white wasted a move, if white went, say, what's a decent wasted move? I don't know, knight c3. Black could castle, and he would be doing fine here. But with the move queen f3, we restrict the king. The king cannot castle, and that means black, it's going to be almost impossible for him to finish development. And black's going to be in a world of trouble. So overall, knight e6 doesn't work. You just take the knight, and either way, after d takes or f takes, white's going to get a big initiative. Now, what about the move d5? This move looks kind of crazy, but the move d5 is very common in a lot of these more aggressive Italian opening positions. So d5 can be played. And here, what should white be doing? Well, it turns out white has a wide variety of options here. For example, e takes d5 is very, very strong. I actually don't know why it has a question mark there. We're getting rid of that. E takes d5 is a good move here. In fact, let's give it an exclamation mark. The point being, you capture the pawn. Your pawn on d5 is very strong. You open up the e file. Rookie 1 ideas are coming. And here, the best move for black is very difficult to find. If you castle, this move is actually a mistake. You can play the move, and we've seen this before. Simply bishop e3. And get a load of this. Again, the knight is being overloaded. We have 2 attackers versus 1 defender. And normally, you would want to go, say, knight e6. You retreat the knight and defend the bishop with the knight. But here, if you go back to e6, obviously, white can just take the knight on e6. So there's actually no good way to defend the knight on d4. And black's going to lose a piece. So again, this just goes to show why in these kinds of tactical positions, you always want to see if there's a way to attack a piece, you always want to check to see, is that a good idea? So here, candidate moves could include c3, bishop e3, and so on, because these moves do attack the piece and they're worth considering. And it turns out here, bishop e3 wins the knight on d4 immediately. So overall, black in this position, after knight takes d4, and then knight takes e5, almost everything is losing. And in fact, the only good move here for black, and it's not a typical move in the Italian, is queen to e7. This is actually the move he has to play. But even here, black is really not doing well. We can play the move bishop takes f7 anyway. Obviously, black cannot take the bishop, as if he does that, we take the queen, and we're doing great. So the king is under attack. The king's got to move somewhere, either f8 or d8. King f8 makes a lot of sense here. But then again, the knight, despite being under attack, we can actually just go back to d3. And one of the ideas behind queen e7 is you attack the knight on e5, and if the knight moves, then the bishop will be lost. But here, knight d3, we give up the defense of the bishop, but we're also attacking the bishop on c5. Therefore, if the queen takes the bishop, then we take the other bishop. So black here has a really hard time. And of course, he can also capture with the king. King takes f7. However, here, white can just crash through with a vicious attack. For example, e5. We attack the knight, and where is the knight supposed to go? If you go to g4 or h5, the queen is going to gobble you up immediately. If you go to, say, d5, there are ideas like queen to h5, for example, hitting the king, and the attack continues. If instead black goes, say, d6, trying to give up the knight, that may actually be the strongest move here, at least according to Stockfish, according to the engine. Then we just take the knight, black takes back, we take the bishop, black takes back. We can go c3, driving away the knight on d4. This d4 knight is very strong. d4 is a very good outpost. Therefore, we do want to get rid of that. We also want to blunt the activity of the queen. Here, if we ever develop our bishop, say to e3, the queen's going to have a lot of activity on this long diagonal. But with c3, we both drive away the knight and we blunt the activity of the bishop on this diagonal. So c3, knight e6, and then here we can kind of do whatever we want. The computer loves the idea of f4, continuing the attack, but there are a lot of good moves right here. So overall, even if black finds the best move, queen e7, he's in a lot of trouble in this position. And therefore, the move knight takes d4, I mean, against almost any... Okay, rewind. If black goes knight takes d4, then we just take the pawn on e5, knight takes e5, and here, regardless of what black does, the best moves here include, for example, castles, d5, knight e6. All of these moves, black gets busted right away. And even against the best move, queen e7, white gets a huge attack. So knight takes d4. Black really can't play that if he's trying to survive. So what can black do? In this position, after we go d4, that is our big whammy, our big surprise for this game. The only good move here for black is actually bishop takes d4. So this move is what he has to do to survive. And it's not an obvious move. Again, black normally wants to go taking with the knight or the pawn. If you take with the bishop, white can always take on d4 later and win the bishop pair. Therefore, it's not an intuitive move to make. And it turns out here, knight takes d4 is in fact the strongest move for white. Now, what is black doing in this position right here? Well, the knight's under attack. Black can take the knight with his knight or with the pawn. And again, black has to find the right move. If he takes with the pawn, then we're going to see a very familiar idea. We're just going to go e5, jumping up with our pawn, driving away that knight. And the obvious idea behind this, yes, the pawn on e5 is under attack. Yes, it is technically hanging. However, if you take that pawn, you are as good as done. You are cooked. For example, knight takes e5, and here the problem for black, his king is not castled. If he had one more move, short castles, black would be very close to winning here, but it's not his move. It's our move as white, and we just go rook e1, attacking the knight. How can black defend this? If he goes queen e7, I mean, now you're lining up the queen on the e file as well, and white goes f4 and wins the knight. If you go, say, d6, trying to defend, again, f4 wins the knight, as that knight is pinned on the e-file. You can't take the bishop, as the rook would be hitting the king. So what else can black do here after e5? Well, knight g8 is technically possible once again, but again, you're undeveloping the knight. Then you have to go to a weird square like h6 or e7. These are not normal ideas. Here, white can go queen to h5, overloading on the f7 square. And what can black do? If he tries to go queen to e7 defending, then bishop g5 attacking the queen is very, very strong. And again, if the queen moves away too far to say, I don't know, c5, we just take on f7, and black is not long for this world. And on the other hand, if he goes knight h6 trying to defend with the knight, then here, white has a very simple tactical idea. It is that tactic again, removing the defender. Here, the knight on h6, it is defending f7, and we can just go bishop takes h6, winning that knight immediately. And of course, after black recaptures, queen takes f7 is going to be checkmate. There's not much need to analyze further. No matter what, black is just busted here. So, what else can black do? Well, it turns out the best move here for black is going to be this resource d5. And again, this is a very good move to always check in these kinds of positions. This move d5, it comes up a lot in the Italian opening, especially when white gets a pawn on e5. If white has a pawn on e5, d5 is normally a decent candidate move. And it does work out okay for black here. Here, though, white can still take an f6. We take here, black takes back, and we saw a position very similar to this earlier. The big difference here is black does not have the bishop pair. I think he had it in the earlier variation, but white's plan is the same. Rook e1, f takes g7. You can play those moves in either order. For example, rook e1, black's got to block the attack, bishop e6. We take on g7, f takes, rook g8, and here, if we can just prevent black from castling long, he's going to be in a world of trouble. For example, queen h5 is very, very good. We're threatening queen takes h7, and that would also hit the rook. And one of the reasons this move right here is so good is if black takes the pawn on g7, that is losing on the spot. And again, there is another tactical idea right here. If you like puzzles, try and find the winning idea for white right here. This one is a very thematic and very beautiful idea. It is simply rook takes e6. And the pawn on f7, here's the kicker. It is now pinned to the king by the queen. So when we went queen to h5, it was a dual purpose idea. First of all, we're threatening queen takes h7 and potentially winning the rook. Beyond that, we're pinning the pawn on f7 to the king, threatening rook takes e6. And there's an old saying, good moves come from good positions. When you put your pieces on good squares and your opponent's king is still stuck in the middle like this, you just often have these good tactical shots available. So, you know, word for the wise, good positions, or sorry, which way is it? Good moves come from good positions. All right. Overall, in this position, after bishop takes d4, knight takes, e takes does not work because then we have the move e5. And as usual, white is just crushing here. But instead, let's say black takes with the knight. Knight takes d4. That is the only good move here. It's the only move that really survives. And what does white do here? Well, it turns out white has a couple of very aggressive ideas. I'm going to show you perhaps the flashier version first and then the more solid version. The flashier version is there's this move bishop g5. It's very, very good. You pin the knight on f6 to the queen on d8. And the reason I'm showing you this move is there is a beautiful trap here. Black almost always is going to go h6, driving back the bishop. According to Lichess, that is the most popular move for black in this position. Now here, we just go bishop h4. We drop back with the bishop, maintain the tension. And now here, again, the most popular move for black is going to be g5 in this position. But this move runs into an absolutely insane idea. I mean, this move from white is going to just blow your socks off. Here, in this position, white can actually go f4. So what the heck is going on here? I mean, this deserves 2 exclamation points. This is such a good move. Obviously, you're giving up the bishop. If black takes there, we just go f takes e5, and now look at this. If you move the knight, then we take on f7 with the bishop. Black's king is stuck in the center. These pawns on e5 and e4 are very, very strong. And beyond that, the knight on d4 is also hanging. And here, black is, despite temporarily being up a piece, he is just completely busted here. There is just no other way to say it. Instead, if black takes on e takes f4, taking with the e pawn, then we just go queen takes d4. And suddenly, the knight on f6, again, is pinned to the rook on h8, and white's attack is just incredibly strong here. Finally, if black goes g takes f4, this move makes a lot of sense. After all, the knight on d4 is still defended. You're capturing towards the center and so on. Black may want to go rook g8 later, setting up ideas on the g file against the white king. But here, white has an equally astonishing move. Again, if you like puzzles, pause the video right now and try to find this one right here. This one is a deflection sacrifice. The knight on d4, it's only being defended once by the pawn on the e5 square. Therefore, if we can remove that pawn from the e5 square, the knight on d4 will be hanging. And here, there is a way to do that. We do it with the move rook takes f4. Again, the deflection sacrifice. The point being, if you take the rook, the pawn no longer defends the knight on d4. And here, after e takes, then queen takes, the kicker here is that knight on f6. It is being pinned twice by the bishop to the queen and by the queen to the rook. Therefore, you can't move the knight. I mean, if you move the knight to say, I don't know, h7, it's like, take your pick. Do you want the rook with check or do you want the queen? I mean, either move wins on the spot. So black here is just completely busted. There's just nothing he can do. I mean, if black wastes a move, say d6, bishop takes, forks these 2 pieces, and again, white's completely winning. Black can't defend. There's just nothing there. So bishop g5 is very dangerous. Now, black does not have to go h6, then g5. If he doesn't do that, he may be okay, but that is the most popular sequence on Lichess for black, so you better believe you can win a lot of games that way. Now, what if black doesn't do that? Or sorry, what else can white do here? Bishop g5 is playable. The strongest move, though, might actually be f4, at least according to the engine. Now, the idea behind this move, it's another deflection sacrifice. If black takes on f4, then the knight on d4 is hanging. White swoops in, takes it, wins a piece, and wins the game on the spot. So black obviously cannot do that. With that in mind, what can he do? Well, if he retreats the knight, that is also a massive blunder. Here we have the very, aggressive idea. Bishop takes f7, giving up the bishop. The point being, very, very soon, white is going to capture on e5, opening up the discovered attack of the rook on the f-file against the king. So, king takes, f takes e5. The knight is now pinned, and if you take on d5 with the knight, knight takes d5, then white has the very simple check, queen d5, which hits the king and the knight. So, queen d5 hits those 2 pieces. The king's got to move, king e8, for example. Queen takes e5. And from here, white is just, again, dominating. Black can go queen e7, trying to defend. But then you can go, say, queen takes c7, continuing the attack. And white here is just crushing. So, overall, knight c6 doesn't work. In fact, the only good move here for black is going to be d6. If black plays that, he's going to be okay. He might even be a tiny bit better, but white is still going to have very good attacking chances. He has very good compensation for the one missing pawn. For example, bishop d3. We start by defending the pawn on the e4 square, a very logical idea. Now black castles. Now we can take on e5, black takes back, and look at this. We suddenly have very good activity on the f-file. We're threatening bishop g5 with the pin on the knight, for example. If black goes, or actually it's our move, bishop g5 is very, very strong. And now what can black do? Here's a sample line showing best play according to the computer from both sides. Knight e6, bishop takes, g takes, king h1, getting the king off the g-file. King h8, black does the same, setting up rook g8 ideas. Then knight c3, black goes c6, controlling d5 and b5, stopping knight jumps from white. And then simply queen f3, targeting the pawn on f6. And here, the computer says that black is technically a little bit better. But I'm going to be honest with you. In a practical game, this position for white is so easy to play. White is the one in the driver's seat. White has the threats. And I would actually rather be white in a game than black here. So even in the one line in this opening, where if black plays perfectly, he can technically get a slightly better position. But even there, in that position, I would rather be white objectively. I mean, you know, it's just so easy to play white here. So again, to review, the only line where black stays alive, e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, black goes bishop c5, castles, knight f6, and then d4 are key idea. If black takes on d4 with the pawn, we go e5, and no matter where the knight goes, or even if black goes d5, white is just crushing. If black takes with the knight, then we take on e5, and again, the threats on f7 are crushing. No matter what, black is in trouble. The only good move here is bishop takes d4. Then we take the bishop, and here again, if black captures with the pawn, we go e5, and the same idea applies. White is just crushing. Therefore, knight takes d4 is the only good move here from black. But then we have two ideas. One is bishop g5 with the very deadly trap. If black goes h6, bishop h4, and then g5, we have the insane move f4. And here, white is on the offense, and he should get a very nice advantage. Instead, the best move here, according to the engine, is going to be f4. And here, even if black plays perfectly, for example, he goes d6, and we follow the main line that I showed you, where white overloads on f6 and continues the attack. Even here in this position, I would rather be white than black, even though the engine says black is technically a little bit better. So overall, this opening for white is actually incredibly dangerous. And if black goes bishop c5 in the Italian, there's almost no good way to avoid it. White castles, and the only good move here from black really is knight f6, but then you just go d4 immediately and the fun begins. And this is one of those reasons as black, I pretty much never go bishop c5 here. I strongly prefer the two knights defense. I personally think knight f6 is a little bit easier to play as black. The only good attacking idea white has right here is the fried liver with knight g5, and the lines there are complicated, but on the other hand, you avoid a zillion other gambit ideas from white. So overall, I do prefer the two knights defense just to avoid these crazy attacking ideas by white. But I mean, hey, if black is going to go bishop c5 here after bishop c4, bishop c5, you can pretty much go straight for this line, and there's almost no way for black to avoid it. So have your fun as white. This line is very dangerous. If you play it online, you will score a bunch of free wins with this move. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm working on making these videos a little more helpful for you guys. And by the way, I just started this free community online to help you guys improve. I'm doing group coaching calls. I'm putting together a free course for you guys, 100% free for now, with videos on the opening, middle game, end game, tactics, strategy, mindset, all of these things. If that interests you, if you want to work directly with me one-on-one, we actually just had our first group coaching call today, Saturday. As I'm filming this, it's Saturday, March 29th. It may not get published today, but this is when we had our first call. It lasted 2 hours. I answered a bunch of questions. We did some training games, some educational games. I reviewed actually some games from members of the community themselves. They sent me some games they wanted me to review for them, and I showed them where they were making mistakes and how to improve and all these things. So if this interests you, if you're stuck at the same rating and you want to improve and you're just not making progress, the link is in the description. It should be in the pinned comment as well. Again, it's 100% free. Feel free to join. I'll message you once you join. Make sure you're onboarded and all that. It's really, in my opinion, one of the best things you can do if you want to rapidly improve at chess. I mean, I will personally help you out to make sure you have all the tools you need to succeed. So if that interests you, if you find these videos helpful or entertaining and you want to work directly with me, again, link is in the description. Check it out, and I'll see you there once you are ready, and I'll see you in the next video.